Right, good evening, everybody. Thanks for coming out. Thanks for bringing autumn and some autumnal rain because despite the chill out there, wow, it's nice to see that. We've had over an inch of rain here in the last, maybe 28 hours. So that's more than welcome. Yeah, rain. My name's Jeff Hoagland. I'm the Education Director here at the Watershed Institute, where our mission is to keep water clean, healthy, and safe. So if you haven't been here before, come back when the sun is shining, or at least it's daylight, and you can check out almost 10 miles of trails. Maybe you'll meet some of the birds that you're going to meet today out here, and maybe you can look at our feeding operation and go, maybe that should be different. I want to also acknowledge that we are on the traditional and ancestral lands of the Lenni Lenape. This continues to be the homeland for the Lenape, and we really value their traditions, their care, and I forget what else I was going to say, but their stewardship of this land, both in the past and present, and we hope that we can do the same type of job. I wanted to just kick this off. I don't have a lot to do with tonight, but we've had a long-standing relationship with the organization that's putting this on, and that's Sourland Conservancy. I say it like that because it used to be the Sourland Regional Planning Council, and the watershed helped inform policy on the Sourlands that helped protect the land. But I think ultimately what happened is the people in the Sourlands got together and banded and wanted more. And that organization has grown, and it's grown really most under the leadership of this woman, Lori Cleveland. And I think just to point out a couple of things we're really pleased with. First of all, Lori brought her, no. Your children who are not, well, they'll always be your children, but used to bring them here for our preschool program way back when. And then I was talking to Allison, who is our stewardship coordinator. I said, tell me about, because I see the effort for the Sourland folks out here, and tell me about the tree. She said, no, I want to tell you about the people. She said that the interns that you hire, said, find out how they hire them. So, yeah. And that they're very lovely. And over 1,000 trees have been planted out here between these interns, and I think part of our staff has helped as well. But that's a great effort and much appreciated. Thank you for that. This is one of my favorite topics, birds, but I'm going to let you do that introduction. Oh, no, I'm not. I am. I just need to mention a couple of things. If you are birdie, there is a hike here on Saturday, December 7th. It's a good non-birder hike, meaning it's good for beginners. We're not getting up at 6 a.m. It's going to be 9 to 11. It'll be a casual walk. I like to tell people I like to commune with birds. I want to let's meet the birds. Let's see what they're doing. Let's learn about their lives. I'm not driving this to get a big checklist. In January, we'll have a course. What was that?
So that's the following week we do the big.
Oh, that's right. We have the Christmas count. Okay. And then let's see what else is going on. We have
hold on. Yeah. That's on December 7th.
December 7th.
At what time?
9 a.m. You putting it on your calendar?
I'm actually going to share it in the email that we
sent nice.
After the talk, so that you don't have to take a note right now.
There you go. What else is going on? I think we have a lot of programming going on. We'll do a greet the winter hike in January. There will be a literature course. If you're interested in nature literature, Winnie Spar does a course here every year. It evolves. It is a course. It is astonishing the amount of knowledge that she exchanges with us. That's great. And then I'm ill-prepared, Anna or Lori, because I'm doing a talk here in this same forum in, I want to say, January. Anybody have an idea?
January 23rd.
All right, thank you, saved me. January 23rd, and we're going to be looking actually at phonology. If you don't know that term, I'm not even going to tell you what it means. You'll have to come out. But through haiku, very small poems. And I have little poems everywhere. They were on the trail for a while, but I'll leave you with maybe a bird one. How's that? Deep winter. The kinglet dies until morning. Lori, I'll leave it to you. Thank you all for coming out on this kind of questionable weather, and I know you're going to enjoy this.
Could you please forward me the information that you just shared about the stuff that's going on, and then we can just include it in the...
Yes, I will. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So, unlike Jeff, I am not a natural speaker, so I'm just going to read my notes and bear with me. Welcome everyone to the Sourland Conservancy's 2024 Talk of the Sourlands. I'm Lori Cleveland, Executive Director of the Sourland Conservancy, and when Jeff started talking about what Miss Allison was going to say about my kids in watershed camp, I started to get really nervous, but now I feel so much better. So, thank you for joining us. I'd like to express my gratitude to the Watershed Institute. Thank you, Jeff, for directing traffic and welcoming us. Thank you so much. Delicious snacks for those at home. I'm sorry that you're missing out, but there are fabulous snacks and a really comfortable space, and we really appreciate you partnering with us on this talk. Yeah. It's so close. If you have not had a chance to wander the trails or admire Jeff's bird feeding setup, please come back on a sunny day and enjoy yourself. There are miles of trails here. They actually connect to Hopewell. And it's just fabulous, fabulous. Beautiful place to walk around, enjoy the meadows, admire the trees, and just relax. It's really just a lovely space.
I'll just add, Lori, it is deer management season. So
Wear bright
once we
orange.
get into December, it would be good to look at the website because many, as you may know, many places to hike, there's deer management with shotguns, and so properties are closed down.
Always enter a trail by the trailhead, and there should be signage too, correct? Always wearing bright colors, I mean, all the time on the trail is just a good habit to get into because it's not just deer hunting season, there are lots of seasons when, just having some bright colors on is just a good idea. Yes. So, I'd like to thank the Sourland Conservancy and Watershed Institute staff and volunteers who plan and run our educational seminars and webinars. Please be sure to say hi on your way out. Pick up some Sourland Conservancy material, and don't forget to pick up some native seed packs. Now's a great time to plant. You can plant those native seeds out right now, or you can winter sow more like holiday time. So those seeds would love to be planted right now, and so if you have a space, they would love to go right into it. I'd like to say thank you to all of our members. Are there any Sourland Conservancy members? I see a few in the audience. Thank you so much. Your membership supports our work all year long, and we really couldn't do it without you. In fact, we did not receive a federal grant that we had applied for this year to continue planting on private land in the Sourlands, so we're counting on our individual memberships more than ever to continue our work on public land. So if you have any questions about membership, I'll be here after. Please let me know. Otherwise, log on to our website at sourland.org and find out all you'd like to know about the Sourlands, and also if you'd like to support our work, we would really appreciate it. So, as you may know, we have planted over 50,000 trees in the Sourlands. Thank you to our staff, our partners, and our volunteers for helping to make that happen. We are losing more than 1 million thanks to the Emerald Ash Borer, so we've got a long way to go. But every tree counts, so planting trees on your own property, protecting trees on your own property, helping us plant trees in the Sourlands. We're gonna do this. So that's it. That's my pitch for the Sourlands. If this is your first in-person Talk of the Sourlands seminar, here's how it goes. I'm going to introduce our speaker, Juanita Hummel, and she'll present for an hour or so, and then answer your questions. We will send a follow-up email with links to books, articles, or other details that Juanita references in her talk so you can learn more. Be sure to keep an eye out for that email. There will be a link to a very short survey We've heard that some folks are having trouble finding out about our events, so we'd really love to hear about how you found out about this event so that we can make sure that we are reaching people where they are. And we would also like to hear your suggestions about how we can improve overall. So thank you in advance for filling that out. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce tonight's speaker. Juanita Hummel has been a Sourland Mountain resident for 37 years and an avid birder for longer than that. After retiring from a career as a lab scientist, she headed outdoors to the natural world to learn more about birds, plants, butterflies, and amphibians, and the habitats in which they live. She is currently serving, no you're not, on the board of the Washington Crossing Audubon?
Past president.
Past president of the Washington Crossing Audubon. I'm sorry, I'm a little behind. She is a Pennsylvania Master Naturalist and a volunteer naturalist at Bowman's Hill Wildflower Preserve. She's participated in many citizen science projects and enjoys eco-traveling to observe birds and plants in their native habitats around the world. Thank you, Juanita. Take it away.
Thanks, Lori. And this really is an old bio because now it's 40 years Sourland resident, so now that really makes me feel old. So I think I'm supposed to speak into this and look at the camera. Hello, everyone out there. I know I've already heard from some of you who are out there, so thank you so much for tuning in. And it just occurred to me that probably if I use this, the people out there in Wi-Fi land won't be able to see that. So I'll try and figure out if I have a cursor on here. Can you see that on here? No? Okay, I'll try and do both. Okay, so when tonight we're going to talk a little bit about some of the birds that you see in the Sourlands in winter. And how to ID them. Some of them you already know. Some of them, a lot of people have trouble IDing. So I'm going to give you a few tips to help you nail those IDs. And then we're going to talk about how to feed them. And due to some recent controversies, if you should feed them, will you be able to feed them in the future? We're going to find out a little bit more about that very soon. And also what to do if you see a sick or injured bird. So we're going to have a little talk about are bird feeders good for birds, or do they spread disease? So this is another burning question that comes up every so often. We'll talk a bit about that. Yes. I have to get, or I can move the, oh yes, I'm a short person, so I have to remember that. Okay, let's see if this works. So move to another slide. Oh, there, oops, no, okay. All right, so this is new. This is an excerpt from the New Jersey Herald from November 15th. This is legislation pending before both the Assembly and the Senate. It's already been through committee. Nobody in the bird world heard much about this until it had already made it through committee in Trenton. And the proposal, it comes up for votes as soon as December. And it is a result of human bear encounters, which are on the rise in New Jersey. There's this mostly in North Jersey where this initiative is coming from. It includes private citizens who just don't like the idea of feeding birds in the first place. They're focusing on birds. They're forgetting about the fact that people leave their garbage outside unattended, that people feed colonies of feral cats and leave cat food outside, that if they have animals, they often leave the animals outside without food. All of that, they're focused on bird feeders for some reason. And part of the driving force behind that might be homeowners associations. I don't know if any of you live in developments with homeowner associations, but a lot of them do not like bird feeders. They are convinced that the bird feeders attract vermin, and those vermin are the animals that the development displaced in order to allow humans to live there. And now they have no place to go, and so they find themselves wandering through developments looking for something to eat. But everything that is not a human is considered to be, like a persona non grata in some of these communities. Even leaves that fall off trees must be picked up immediately, or else there will be hell to pay from some of them. We're not sure what's going to happen. So the legislation would make the unintentional feeding of bears punishable by fines of up to $1,000 per offense. So unintentional feeding means intentional feeding of bears is probably already illegal and is very unwise under any circumstances. But this unintentional feeding of bears through bird feeders I don't know how they're going to enforce that, first of all, and how are you going to avoid pitting neighbor against neighbor, turning your next door neighbor in because they had the temerity to put out a bird feeder. So, and there are, if you want to, it looks like they might allow you to feed birds at any time after November 30th and before April 1st, because that's when the bears are hibernating, but they've got a whole series of restrictions they want to put on that too, like having the feeders suspended 10 feet above the ground. You know, why would you need that if there are no bears? Only a bear is going to need, you know, you only need to put things up 10 feet in the air if you want to prevent bears from getting to them. The bears are asleep then, they're not going anywhere. They are active between April 1st and November 30th. And so that's not so bad but you can still prevent bears from getting into your feeders by not attracting them in the first place. So let's just do bird feeders attract bears? Well, yes, they do, and we have proof of that. This was taken in my backyard one August. This mother bear appeared out of the woods with 2 cubs, and I was on the deck at the time, and I saw them coming, and I couldn't believe my eyes. This was thrilling. They see these beautiful cubs and this beautiful mother. And she went right to the bird feeders. This was not her first trip to the yard. I could tell that right away. And this is the reason why, although this was a thrilling sight, we no longer leave our bird feeders out at night in the summer. So that's what you do. If there are bears active, bring them in at night. They usually don't come out in the day. When you have bears usually forage at night. When you have a bear that's coming in the day, it's usually a bear like this, a mother with hungry mouths to feed. Either they're still back in the den or she's bringing the cubs with them. That's what brings the bears out in the daytime. They find these feeders at night. If you bring them in at night, which we do now and have done for at least, this was about 20 years ago, I think this picture was taken, you don't have problems with bears. And we see them coming through the yard at night on our security cameras, but they don't come anywhere near the bird feeders because they've already been brought in. We also cut back on our feeding in the summertime too, because you really don't need to. Most of the birds that are here in the summer are insect eaters. They're looking for insects, they're not looking for seeds. The birds that come down from the north in the winter are mostly seed eaters. They do eat seeds and they do appreciate them. So really there's ways of using our human brains to prevent this conflict without having to pass laws that restrict this hobby that so many people have connected to nature through doing, and it's just totally unnecessary. So I'm going to be sending some of this information to Lori, and she's going to gather up her advocacy committee, and we're going to see if we can push back a little bit before the final vote is taken and just get some other opinions in there before something like this. I can't believe, you know, they say you shouldn't pass laws that you can't enforce. How are they going to enforce this without making like a total mess? Oh, I have a little video. If I can run that here, I'm not sure if I can run this video. I don't think I can run the video from this, but basically it just showed how the mother was showing her babies. She'd clearly been at this bird feeding before, how to tip it up and just pour the seed into your mouth, basically. Useful for young bears to know. Oh, there it goes, okay. And so this one got a little bit, she gave him a little cuff there to get him out of the way, because I guess she was hungry too. Okay, so let's move on to a little bit, of bird ID. So there are an awful lot of birds. I actually brought this poster to a presentation once. This is all the birds you can see in the United States. There are about 1,000 of them, or close to it. And guess what? These are all males. That's only the males. This is what the males look like. So if you understand that a lot of females do not look like the males, that adds like another at least half as many again. And the juveniles sometimes don't look like either of their parents. So if you're finding it difficult to identify birds, it's no surprise. So, but there's an easier way to get started at least. Okay, where did that come from? Okay. Yep, is that the right, am I pressing the right button here? Come on. It's not moving. Okay, I cannot get it to move here. I'm pressing the, it's not moving. Oh, I guess I have to, okay. Let me get next. I saw next come up. Next, please.
This is all fun to look at, so don't.
Is it? It just is not advancing. Okay, I don't know. Maybe you should have a look at this and see. So this is what I did before.
Yeah.
That's what I'm supposed to do, right? Okay, so how come it works for your, not for mine? Okay. All right, so like real estate, the species that you see depends on location, location, location. So where you are on the planet, where you are in the country, what kind of habitat type you're in, and what season it is. So in order to, let's see if I can try to look. Yes. So to narrow the focus from all the species in the world, and I have almost 150 species now since I made this slide on my Sourland yard list alone. But they're not all there all the time. So we're going to look at the 40 species that are visit backyards, especially those with feeders in the Sourlands in winter, just to get you started. Okay, so let's start with this guy. Everybody knows this bird. This is a blue jay. It's unmistakable, very easy to identify, at least here in the east. If you went out west, there are lots of other large blue birds that you can find that are jays, but they're not our eastern blue jay. So what you want to do is to not look at the color of the bird or the size of the bird. You want to look at some other things on the bird that will help you nail IDs. So I'm going to use this bird again. So this is what feathers tell us method, and I think some of you have heard about this one before. This was developed by the McGill Bird Observatory in Montreal. And the WFTU, just be careful not to reverse it, WTF, it might mean something different, but if that helps you remember it, that's fine, just don't say it out loud. You start with the W, which stands for wings, and one of the things to look at there is, are there any bars on the wings? Because wing bars in some species can be the make or break of an ID. The difference between two birds, when you see them in the field, they look so similar that the presence or absence of wing bars can be the defining characteristic. So just get used to looking at the wings. Don't just look at, oh, it's a big blue bird, look at the wings. And this one, the blue jay has very uniquely patterned feathers on the wings. The F stands for face. So here you're going to be looking at the eyes. Is there a line through the eye, or do they have an eyebrow type stripe or a ring around the eye? And look at also the beak, the shape and the size. And the blue jay has a classic large seed eater beak. It's very broad at the base, kind of triangular, and a point, so it can pound things open. It can also carry large things around in its mouth. So this tells you this is a bird that probably eats seeds and nuts. It likes acorns in particular. Finally, the tail. So here you're going to be looking at how the bird holds its tail. Is it cocked up in the air? Does it waggle its tail when it's perched? Is there any special color on the tail or pattern? And finally, this is not too useful necessarily in the winter, but certainly for certain migrating warblers in the fall. Looking at the colors of the feathers underneath the tail is really, you can't see, no, that doesn't show up at all. I could actually use that, but so that would be this area right under here. In this bird, it's white, but in some other birds, it's a different color, and sometimes that's a definitive ID for a bird that looks very similar to another one. Plus, you see all sorts of other interesting things under there, so just get in the habit of looking under the tail of birds and see what you can see. So here's an example of a bird with a cocked tail, it's a Carolina wren. And it tends to sit with its tail tucked underneath when it's singing, like here, but when it's perched or walking around, it tends to have it stuck up in the air. That's a classic wren tail. We have 3 species of wren that you could potentially see in New Jersey, but you don't see them all. You see 2 species in the summer, 2 species in the winter. One of them is the same species both times because it's a year-round resident, and it's this one. The Carolina wren is the only one of these 3 species of wren that has a white eyebrow, so that's a very distinctive identifying mark. It has a different bill. This is primarily an insect eater. It will eat seeds, sunflower seeds and suet, but it's primarily an insect eater, and it has a long, thin, slightly curved insect-eating beak because it will glean things like bark on trees and around buds on flowers and things like that, looking for insects, which are its primary food most of the year. And this is the one you hear out in the Sourland woods all the time. Tea kettle, tea kettle, tea kettle, tea. And it mostly sings in the summer, but every so often it'll shout out in the winter. Here's another very familiar bird, the northern cardinal, another one with a triangular broad beak at the base. This is another seed eater. The males and the females are different. The males are red, obviously, and they actually get redder during the winter because their feathers actually wear out over the winter. They put on their new plumage in the fall. The feathers wear out over the winter and they get redder and redder, so that by the time spring comes, they're really, really red and ready to attract females. It's rather interesting how that works for them. And the females look mostly like the males, but much drabber. And another bird you probably recognize, the tufted titmouse. This is a really cute little bird. And the one on the right is nothing wrong with it. It's just newly fledged. It's so newly fledged that it's trying to figure out how to use its various body parts. We found this on our driveway, and it was able to perch on my husband's hand. That's my husband Blaine's hand there that's holding up this bird. It looks very disgruntled, but it's okay. If you look at the base of the beak here, I can show you the people who are here in the room. So this little area over here where the beak is, right at the base here, that's called the gape. It's still yellow. That's a sign that it's a baby bird, because baby birds have a yellow gape when they open their mouths. The theory is that it triggers parents to feed them. But that's how you can tell a juvenile bird from an adult many times, if the gape is still present. So he eventually straightened up his wings, learned what they were there for, and got his crest also straightened up before we put him back down to be fed by his parents. It didn't take long. Chickadees. In the chickadees, we have a unique situation that's present in the Sourlands here. We could have black-capped chickadees, we could have Carolina chickadees, and we also, mostly in the Sourland region, see hybrid chickadees. So that's why we ask, if you're reporting chickadees in the Sourland region, that you not try and guess what species they are unless you're really sure, because most of them are probably hybrids. They're very difficult to tell apart. You can actually tell hybrid chickadees from Carolina chickadees because they have the white outer tail feathers that are characteristic of the black-capped chickadees, but you can't tell by their song, because they could sing a black-capped song, they could sing a Carolina song. Whoever their father was, and if they're a male, they're going to sing daddy's song, and sometimes they make up their own songs, which are a mix of the two. And what's happening here is really quite interesting, because we are in this hybrid zone here, which stretches across the eastern United States, and this is where the black-caps come in contact with the Carolinas. And this was a graph done in 2014 by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, and they were finding that the northern part of this hybrid zone was increasing at the rate of 7 miles about every 10 years, and it's continuing to do that. And there are a couple of things going on here. Probably climate change is affecting this northern push. The Carolinas are finding it more suitable to them. They're more of a warm weather bird. You can see they're mostly in the southern part of the country, and the black-caps are mostly in the north, all the way up to almost to the boreal forest. And so, another interesting thing is going on, that the black-capped chickadees are larger than the Carolinas, and apparently the Carolina chickadee females have a preference for the bigger black-capped chickadee males. And so it's actually the female chickadees that are pushing this movement northwards. They themselves are moving north. They're running into these lovely, handsome males who are bigger and stronger than their own ones back home, and they're mating with them. So. And the other thing that's happening in our area, and this has been confirmed at the Featherbed Lane Banding Station, which is just down the road from where I live. My friend Hannah Sotherson, a lot of you know also, runs that banding station. They're finding that the hybrids now are breeding with each other. So we've got speciation going on here. So a new species of this hybrid bird is evolving right in front of our eyes. And as this zone increases, that's probably going to accelerate. Just interesting little Okay, a lot of you probably know nuthatches. We have two species of nuthatch you might see. The white-breasted nuthatch on the left is the one that is most common, and that's the bird that flies to the middle of the tree and goes downwards. It prefers being upside down whenever it can. It can, as you could see in the picture underneath, perch like a normal bird, but it doesn't do that for very long. It just really likes being upside down. It has the insect eater beak that it uses to probe crevices and bark, and they love suet. They also eat sunflower seeds, but they really like suet. And this is, on the right, is the red-breasted nuthatch, which occasionally we see, usually during migration, sometimes in the fall, sometimes in the spring. They do breed in northern Hunterdon County occasionally, but mostly they're farther north than that. They're not really red-breasted. If you look, they're more of like an orangey pink flushed breasted nuthatch, I would call it. But you can tell them from the white-breasted right away by the fact that they have this eye line right through. It's like a black mask. Whereas it's a cap. Whoops, wrong bird. It's a cap, just a black cap on the white-breasted nuthatch. And you will notice right away, if you're looking at these nuthatches, that there's something different with this one. So just look for that eye line right away and a little blush of red on the front, and that's a red-breasted nuthatch. They also have a very different call. It kind of sounds like a yank, yank. They're very loud for such small birds. And this is one of my favorite birds, the brown creeper. This is a cute little bird that this one, rather than going down the tree, starts at the bottom of the tree and goes up. And it's probing the bark for insects, but they also like suet. If you want to have one visit your house in the winter, you can put a block of suet on a tree, and they will probably find it, and they will keep coming back to it. And I get these every year, up to 3 at a time. I once got flagged on eBird. They're usually solitary, but I got flagged on eBird for putting in too many brown creepers that I saw at one time. But I had 3 of them at the same time on the tree, so I marked 3. And, you can't, there's not too many, something's wrong there. So. But for a real birder, that's yes, I got flagged on eBird. I found something, unusual. So I didn't mind at all. Mourning doves, this is another thing you see at your feeders in the winter. These are year-round residents. If you live in town, if you live on a farm, you might sometimes see pigeons, rock pigeons. These are an introduced species. The mourning dove is very distinctive. They all look the same, poor things, except in the summertime. The male has a little blue flush on his feathers, and the female's a little pink flush, makes it very convenient to tell boy from girl. But in the winter, they don't have any of those markings for the most part. And hairy versus downy woodpecker. How many people here are really confident that they can just look at one and tell it, yes, good for you? Because you know that the hairies are larger than the downies. But here are 2 things that you can use if you're not sure what you're seeing, because size in the field is very deceptive. You can't just go by size alone, is to look at the beak. And the beak on the hairy woodpecker, from the base of the beak to the tip of the beak, is about the same distance as from the base of the beak to the back of the head. So if you can just look at that and do that little geometric thing in your head. Whereas in the downy woodpecker, if you were to take this beak and bend it backwards, it would only go to about the middle of the head. So the downy has a noticeably shorter beak. And the other thing the downy has, at least in the East Coast, or the eastern part of the United States, is if you can, no, not that one. You can look at the outer tail feathers. They're all white on the hairy, and there are little spots. They're actually barred, but they look like spots when you see them. When the bird has its tail folded, you'll see these little spots in the downy woodpecker. That only occurs in the downy. You'll know right away then if you look at the beak and the tail. Again, it's all part of this FTU system. You will know right away what that bird is. Also, if you get to see the back of the head of the male downy and the male hairy both have red patches on the back of their head, and if there is a black line through that red patch, that is a male hairy woodpecker. Unfortunately, it doesn't work for the females. They all have a black line down through the back of their head. But if this appears on a male, then you know you're looking at a hairy woodpecker. And hairy woodpeckers are much less common than downies. We have them here in the Sourlands because we have so many trees. They need about 10 acres of contiguous habitat in order to breed. So downies need about 1 acre. So the Harrys are one of those birds that really benefit from something like the Sourland forest. And there's another bird you'll see in a minute that benefits even more, but this is the bird where everybody's, oh, I saw a red-headed woodpecker. That is not a red-headed woodpecker. Yes, it has a red head. It's called the red-bellied woodpecker, and no, it doesn't have a red belly either, so I don't know what they were thinking when they named this one. Actually, they named it from a preserved specimen that they found in a museum drawer, so and if you've ever seen those, they're all lying on their backs, staring up the ceiling like this, and so they were able to see. Sometimes you see a little red feather, sometimes there's a red blush, but the real red-headed woodpecker is the one on the right. It has no stripes or striations in the feathers. It's just black and white with a completely red head. So that one is well named. I can go along with that name. And they do breed here, but they don't turn up in the same place every year. So you just kind of have to get lucky in order to be able to see it. And and if you do, it will be very noticeable. But they have no site fidelity. So 1 year they're here, 1 year they're there. If you go down south to Georgia, for example, they're all over the place. If you go out west, you can easily see them. But they're just not that common here. However, it is absolutely a thrill to see them. They're really gorgeous birds. And another bird that you can see is the northern flicker. The identifying characteristic here is this bib on the front, and they're very spotty. If the light catches them just right, you can see why they're known as the yellow-shafted form, which is what we have here in the east. If you go out west, the same species of bird has red in place of the yellow. It's kind of in the woodpecker family, but unlike many other woodpeckers, it doesn't excavate its own nest. It often uses the nesting holes of other woodpeckers. In fact, it does that whenever it can. And this is North America's only migratory woodpecker, yellow-bellied sapsucker. The belly is kind of yellow sometimes, not always, so don't go by that. You've got to be careful with some of these bird names. The males have a red throat, females do not. But one of the habits that this bird has, you might see it at your suet feeders. It doesn't really go to the other types of feeders. It might go to that suet feeder that you've got nailed to a tree. They have a tendency to just sit there for long periods of time. And I've noticed that their patterns on the back really look kind of like lichen. So they kind of look like something that should be sitting on a tree. Maybe that's why they developed that. But after they've eaten or while they're eating, they just kind of sit there for up to half an hour, not moving. Very strange behavior. And here is the magnificent pileated woodpecker, which you will never forget once you've seen it. This is a gorgeous bird. This bird needs 50 acres of contiguous forest in order for it to breed, and that's why you don't see them in very many places. I have never seen one of these at my suet feeder. Other people I know have, and it's interesting. My sister wrote to me. She lives in a suburb up in Montreal and said, I had a pileated woodpecker on my suet feeder. I said, that's great. Do you have a new housing development going up in your neighborhood? And she said, yes, we do. And I said, that's why you have a pileated at your suet feeder. The bird has been displaced from where it was living, or part of its territory has been replaced with housing. The same thing happened to another friend of ours who moved to North Carolina, which is seeing a big housing boom. A lot of houses are being built in the North Carolina forest. And he also had pileated woodpeckers coming to he moved into a brand new house, had them coming to his suet feeders. So those birds had been living on that land before the house was there, and now they're being displaced. So this is a bird I don't want to see coming to my suet feeder. I want to see it finding as much food as it needs forever out in the Sourland forest. Okay. Everybody probably has seen these little guys, white-throated sparrows. They come in two forms, the white form on the left and the tan form on the right. They could be male or female. Nobody really knows why they take on these two forms, but I did do a birding expedition in the Canadian Arctic. Our leader was an emeritus professor, ornithologist from the University of Alberta, and he did his thesis work on white-throated sparrows, and he found that pairs of these sparrows, if one was one form and one was the other, had better outcome in, they produced more eggs, and the survival outcome of the young was better, but nobody knows why that is. So, so the white form has this bright white stripe with yellow lores. That's a little area here between the bill and the eye. The tan form has the white throat, but the white stripe is missing. They're still the same bird. So you can't add an extra species to your list if you see the two different forms. And here's a song sparrow, very common. This is a year-rounder. The white-throated sparrow only comes in the winter, so when they come, it starts to get really cold. So when you start seeing white-throated sparrows, you know winter is really coming. But this bird is here all year round. It's a song sparrow, kind of rusty brown. And its characteristic thing is the big, where all these stripes congeal in the middle of the chest to make a spot. This is another sparrow. It doesn't look like a sparrow, but I did see these up in Newfoundland where they breed. They breed near the boreal forest in Canada. And the babies look like sparrows. The babies are all stripy. They look like a completely different bird. And as they get into their adult plumage, they either get darker like this. This is the male on the left and the female on the right. My sister says they look like they're wearing sweaters that shrunk in the wash. Oops. And this is a beautiful sparrow. This is a white-crowned sparrow. These come down every winter too. They mostly spend time in grasslands, but every so often you can find one under your feeder, particularly when the weather is bad in the winter, like that first picture I showed you where all kinds of birds come in from everywhere, even birds that don't normally go to feeders, to try and find some food because the snow and possibly ice are covering their usual food sources. And so you might see this one under those conditions. It looks somewhat similar to the white-throated sparrow, but it's noticeably larger, and its breast is completely clear. Does not have the delineated white throat, and it has the white stripe, bright white stripe on the crown of the head, and also black, nothing below the eyes. Absolutely beautiful sparrow. I hope you get to see those sometime. They also have a very nice song. It's similar to the white-throated, but just different enough. You can tell they're a related species, but not identical. Here's another little sparrow from the boreal forest. This one is the northern tree sparrow, and you can usually find these in grasslands, sidereal grasslands. They turn up. They're often in places near marshes, so going to Amwell Lake, for example, in East Amwell, you can sometimes see them there in the winter. And they're very much like our chipping sparrows, which leave and go south in the winter to be replaced by this little guy here. They both have these rusty caps. So distinctive here is this spot in the middle of the breast and the fact that they have a two-tone bill. So the upper part of the bill is black and the lower part is yellow. So if you see that, that is definitely a tree sparrow. Sometimes find towhees rummaging around under the feeders. They're the only birds with big rusty patches, the male on top and the female on the bottom. And they rarely get up into the feeder. You see it occasionally, but if you have wood piles, they really like rummaging around in wood piles or in the bunches of debris left over under the bird feeders. Again, they're most likely to turn up in bad weather. This is a fox sparrow. This is really exciting because we usually only see these in the winter, and I looked out this morning and I saw one in my yard this morning. It was not under the feeder. It was in some of the native plant beds that I have planted near the feeders. I'll show you a couple of those later on. That's a whole other program, by the way. I may have to come back and tell you about that, using growing your own bird feeder. But this is a beautiful bird. It's a little bit bigger than the normal sparrows. It's it's kind of like fox color. It's called fox because of the colors of the brown striping on it. It has a gray head. And this is a picture of it next to, just to illustrate the color that's in the back, in our back patio. We have some antique bricks. They're that rusty brick color, and you can see that bird blends in very well with that brick. Maybe they should call it the brick sparrow. Brick-colored sparrow, but it's really a pretty bird. This is a house sparrow. This is one I don't have on my yard list. Nobody believes me, but it's true. I've never had a sparrow in my yard. I don't have sparrow habitat. They like to be closer to people in more open areas, so more suburban areas, urban areas. If you live in town, you're going to see them, female on the left and the male on the right. And they eat junk food mostly. So I've seen them in feeders in Central Park. That's about the only place where I've seen them actually patronizing feeders. They're more likely to be, in the parking lot eating French fries or something. They're absolutely 100% adapted. When you consider they evolved with Europeans for thousands of years, they're totally dependent on humans practically now. Yeah, somebody was just, Kiersey was talking about having sparrows in her yard, and they're showing an interest in her bluebird boxes. And she was wondering what you should do about that. Since these sparrows are not a native species, you are free to do whatever you want with them. I'm not recommending anything here, but you can remove the nest. You're not allowed to do that to a native bird, whether you like that native bird or not. It's illegal to do anything with their nest, to remove the eggs, to damage them. You're allowed to do that with sparrows. You can remove the nest from the box as many times as you need to. Feel free to destroy the eggs. I know people who will take the nestlings and just quietly dispose of them. I've never been able to do something like that myself, but there are people who can do that to save those boxes for bluebirds, the only reason we still have bluebirds, why they didn't go extinct, is because people started putting up bluebird boxes because they were under so much pressure from these house sparrows. So you're allowed to do something about house sparrows in order to protect native birds. It is okay. And you can even do this. This one's in a cage on the left here. This one was being rehabbed, if you read my recent post on Sourland stewards. This is a friend this bird was found with a leg injury and brought to her for rehabbing, and she's going to keep it because it's not going to be releasable, survivable. But so if you want a captive bird, don't go to the pet store and get a bud. You go out and get yourself a sparrow. Or you can get a starling if you want to. They're smart. They can learn how to speak to you. They can learn songs. Get them out of the environment and into cages. That's how. A lot of people are like, what is this bird? This is a goldfinch in the winter. It looks very different from the way it looks in the summer. And here's where the wing bars come in handy, because in a male goldfinch in the summer, you don't really see much in the way of barring, but those just jump right out at you in the winter. So if you see a bird outside with these bright wing bars, that's a winter goldfinch. And every so often, the last time this happened, these are pine siskins here on the right. They are also related to finches, actually, but they like to hang out with goldfinches when they're in the same area. And these turned up they're an eruptive species, so they don't come every year. They only come when things are really bad up north and the food supplies have really dwindled. The last time these ones came was just before Hurricane Sandy. We had a huge flock in our yard. Before I stopped counting, I counted 85 siskins just outside. They were everywhere. And they were all mixed in with the goldfinches. They eat similar seeds. Goldfinches like thistle seeds, and so do the siskins. But so the siskins are much more heavily striped. They have yellow, a little bit of yellow, particularly the male. Sometimes you don't see much yellow in them. This is a little bit of yellow. I'll show you this next picture here, this is a goldfinch beside a siskin. You see they have a little bit of yellow, and they're very feisty. They're always fighting with each other and showing off and flipping their wings and, get out of my way, I was here first, I guess if there are 85 of them in a small place, these tussles do break out. But I don't know when we're next going to see them. So Hurricane Sandy was quite a while ago. That's quite a number of years. But if this bird that you don't recognize turns up, have a look. That might be what it is. House finches and purple finches. So purple finches are native and house finches are not. I imagine some people have some confidence in telling one from the other when they see them at the feeders, but there's a lot of people don't. It has nothing to do with the color. Some house finches a lot of them are orangey red. They can have a little bit of red on them. Some of them have a lot. The purple finches can be very purpley. They can also look a little orangey. Some of it depends on what they're eating. But there's one sure way to tell a male house finch from a male purple finch, and that is look at the wings here. The upper coverts on the wing, so the wing is the part down near the tail up here, is always brown in house finches, always brown. And it's on the bird on the bottom there, there's always some color in there, some of that purple color in the upper part of the wings. And that's how you can easily tell the difference, because some of them are very colorful in both of the species and some are not so colorful. So the color is not really a good indication. And the females are on the other side. The females are much more heavily streaked than the house finch female. And they have a noticeable black mask. Some people will say, well, look for a black mask also in the male purple finch. And sometimes they do have it. You can see the one here has hardly anything. And I think I have another picture here of one. No, this is two. This is just a house finch on the top and purple finch on the bottom. Oops, that's back again too much. But here's a male house finch on the left and the purple finch, male purple finch on the right. And that one does have a very noticeable black mask like the female. So, but it's not always present in the male. So look for the color, that color suffusing the wings. You can see that clearly here, that there's some pink in the upper part of the wings on the right, but not in the bird on the left. You'll get it right every time. Eye disease, finch eye disease. This is something I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about, because this is another reason why people say you shouldn't feed birds, because it spreads disease and everything. Bird feeders do not cause bird diseases, and they don't cause finch eye disease, although certainly having birds together might be an issue for spread. But we have the finch eye disease, which used to be called house finch eye disease, because we have house finches, which are not native to the eastern United States. And this eye disease, which you can see here, the bird on the left, it affects mostly house finches. We had a big epidemic in 2016, you can see from the date on this, and it did spread to a couple of other birds. I didn't have masses of dead birds in my yard, but I did see members of each species with this disease. Their feathers around their eyes get stuck together. They can get so swollen. Their eyes can swell shut to the point where they can't see. This is on the right is a goldfinch that had its eyes so shut, swollen shut by this disease that it could barely see. And so what they tell you to do if you see this eye disease is you're supposed to remove your feeders and allow the birds to disperse. But I've learned that the birds can recover from this disease. And what kills them is usually not the disease, it's starvation, because they can't forage and find food. And so when this bird, this goldfinch, was at my feeder, I had a real dilemma, because I noticed it was living in a little shrub and flying, and I was able to follow it for a few days, and it was flying to a tree, and it went from the tree to the feeder to the bush, back to the feeder. If I'd removed that feeder, I'm quite positive that bird would have died. It had just enough sight left to avoid my capturing it. If you capture them, you can bring them to someplace like Mercer County Wildlife, and they can fix them. They'll treat them with antibiotics, but they're even, they're so leery of predators that this is not an easy thing to do. So if you see the early signs, maybe one bird with it, you want to take your feeders down and just take them away for a couple of weeks till the bird disperses. I don't believe that's going to stop it if this is going to come back again. And let's just look a little bit deeper into this, because the story is kind of interesting. So the disease is caused by a bacterium known as Mycoplasma gallisepticus, which is a bacterium that causes respiratory disease in poultry, turkeys in particular, but also chickens. And it was first, the symptoms of this disease were first described in 1905 on a turkey farm in Maryland. So remember that. Maryland is where this disease turned up. But the causative organism wasn't cultured until 1960. And this disease in turkeys is one of the reasons why you see advertised today, no antibiotics are used in our chickens. Well, they were used excessively for many years, in part to prevent this disease from occurring in commercial basically poultry factories where they had all the birds crowded together and very close together in proximity, and all other kinds of diseases too. I used to work for a pharmaceutical company that made additives that went into animal feeds and poultry feeds, and it was just like a laundry list of antibiotics that you added to the animal food to prevent all the diseases that were caused by them being too crowded together. So then in 1960, they found out what it actually was, and they noticed that it also infects chickens, but no worries, it doesn't affect humans or pets or any other mammals. It's just, and it doesn't, occasionally turns up on other birds, but that's quite rare. But then in 1993 and 1994, guess what happened? House finches, and this was actually captured because of the Project Feeder Watch. They made this connection, which is another initiative from the Cornell labs in 1990, the winter of 1993 and 94 in Maryland, in the DC area. But it's manifest in those birds as an infective conjunctivitis. So rather than being, it still has respiratory symptoms which are not as severe as they are in turkeys, but it's mostly expressed in the eyes of the bird. That 1 year, about half of the population of the eastern population, because they're a western bird that was introduced into the east, half of the eastern population died in 1994. So that was like, everybody went crazy. Oh no, what's killing all these birds? It was this disease being introduced into a naive population, kind of like when polio and smallpox were introduced into the South Pacific and into indigenous people in the Arctic that had never experienced these diseases before. The morbidity was tremendous. Okay, and they also drew the conclusion that because this disease caused blindness, that the cause of death, because the birds can recover from it, was starvation. They couldn't see to find food. So this is where you get this pull here. Do I take my bird feeders down, or do I leave them up so that, because the birds already know that the food is here and maybe they can work through it? It's not an easy decision to make. But let's look at a little bit more at our house finches. So these house finches picked this disease up in Maryland. This is where it was first noticed. And look at Maryland. My son went to Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. We used to drive down there that way and then go south along the Chesapeake, where there's lots of good birding, and to Blackwater. And I noticed as we were on the way from Baltimore down to the southern part of Maryland, all these poultry farms, they're everywhere. So I just went on Google Map the other day. I said, I wonder how many there really are. And they're all over the place. Each of these red things is a large commercial poultry operation. So where do you think these house finches in Maryland got this disease from? They probably were hanging out at the poultry farms. There's lots of food there for them. They like grains and things like that. And undoubtedly, that's where they picked it up. And then it started to spread. So these maps here show on the, the map on the left side there on the western side shows the normal range of the house finch. But as you see in succeeding decades here, the birds were a small group, about 20 birds were released. They were captured in California by a guy who owned a pet shop in Brooklyn. He was selling these birds in his shop under the name of Hollywood finches. And somebody turned to me and said, you're not allowed to do that because the Migratory Bird Treaty Act of 1936 made keeping native birds, even native birds that were, any native birds that were native to North America as pets. This was not allowed. So he decided that he was going to let them go, and he did. He let them go on Long Island. 20 birds, that's all, and they started to spread. And so these subsequent maps show how this spread rapidly, because there were again, when you release an invasive organism of any kind into an environment where there are, it doesn't have a history and no predators, it can take over. But this whole population that spread, and eventually, by, I think it was 1990 or something, in the 90s, it reached like the middle of the country and basically caught up with the Western population. This population was not genetically diverse. It was all from the same 20 birds, this whole eastern population. And so animals like that are very susceptible to an illness, and that's why the finches just got it. And they thought it was a strain, a slightly different strain of the Gallisepticum, and it just ravaged them. That doesn't happen now. They're still around. They're rebounding. You know, the ones that survived are now have. So you don't see these huge epidemics of this eye disease anymore, but it does turn up. And I talked to the people at Mercer County Wildlife today to see if they'd had any cases so far this year. They haven't, and they said they only had 3 cases last year or so. I don't know what's going to happen this year, but it comes in cycles. So the disease spread, okay, so so the disease turned up in this population, and then it started to spread, so it reached the West or the Midwest, Montana in 2002, and then it was finally found in the original population of house finches west of the Rocky Mountains in 2006. And so it was a bunch of things. It wasn't bird feeders that caused this disease. It was a whole bunch of other things going on in the environment that caused this disease to turn up in the first place and be spread in this way. And none of it was natural. So it cycles through the population every few years. Maybe bird feeders play a role, but the thing is that finch species are gregarious. Anyway, they hang out in groups. I've watched them walking along trees with these eyes, rubbing them on branches, so they're spreading it all through the woods as well. I don't think that bird feeders really are a huge cause of the spread of this disease, but you know, there are things that you can do. And as I mentioned, it is curable if you can capture them, and the thing to use is something like a butterfly net. You can capture them and bring them, but they're not easy to, definitely not easy to catch, I can tell you that. Some years we get redpolls. This is another type of finch. These normally stay up in the Arctic. I've seen them at feeders in the Arctic. It's really cool. You go up to the Arctic and the birds of the bird feeders are redpolls and snow buntings. But they don't go anywhere near bird feeders usually when they're down here, although you could find a few that happen to live in a town somewhere up in the Arctic. There's only a few of them and are familiar with bird feeders, and they could turn up at yours. I've never had them. I'm still waiting. I hope they come some year. If you have birds, you also have birds that eat birds that come by the bird feeders, and the accipiters are the bird feeder specialists. So these are difficult to tell apart. One is larger than the other. Coopers are bigger. The little sharp-shinned are smaller, but the overlap is very close since there's a disparity in size between males and females. Females are larger, males are smaller, so the male of the Cooper's hawk is almost the same size as the female of the sharp-shinned. So size is not really good. There are some subtle differences, but here you can look at the tail, and typically the Cooper's has a more rounded tail, whereas the tail of a sharp-shinned is kind of flat or maybe a little bit notched. They both have barring. It's just not obvious in the photo of the Cooper's hawk. But a lot of people don't want to feed birds because they say they attract hawks. But these are hawks that eat birds. That's how they stay alive. So, you know, I don't think that's a good reason for not putting up bird feeders either. And Scott Barnes of New Jersey Audubon people call me all the time, how do I keep hawks away from my bird feeders? And he said, well, hawks are birds. You've got bird feeders. You've got birds coming to your bird. What are you talking about? Crows, occasionally you will find them, not too often. A lot of people who are not familiar with grackles think maybe the grackles are crows. They aren't. They come through in big flocks sometimes in the winter, big. Some of them, they have thousands of them at a time. And some people, if you live in cities, you might find them all year round at your bird feeders. But here in the forest, we usually just see them in their winter foraging flocks. And they're kind of fun to watch, how they just all seem to decide to move all together like a common mind. Starlings, this is a winter starling and on the upper left, and that starling they're really beautiful in their winter plumage. I think they're very pretty. But again, wouldn't you like to have one of those as a pet? Why don't you go out and get some and put them in cages and keep them home, because they will take nesting boxes from all kinds of birds, including things like the American kestrel. They're one of the top predators or the top competitors for kestrel nesting boxes in grasslands. The bird on the right is a juvenile red-winged blackbird, and the only time I see red-winged blackbirds is when there's snowstorms or when there's a lot of snow on the ground and ice, and they will turn up at the feeders too. And the ones here, the females, nobody ever recognizes those as being red-winged blackbirds, but they look like large stripy sparrows, but they usually have yellow or yellowy orange under the throat, and that's how you can tell what you're looking at. Okay, we have also robins come sometimes to eat. If you have mealworms out, bluebirds sometimes eat suet in the winter. You occasionally find a few little yellow-rumped warblers, easy to identify by the yellow rump, hanging out with the other birds. And kinglets will often come to find out what's going on and forage. They usually don't go to the feeder, but they'll forage in all the bushes and plants and everything around your feeders. They have a very noticeable white eye ring, and they never stop moving. Absolutely darling little fellas. And occasionally you'll get wild turkeys. They usually come in groups, and they do like what you've got to offer under the bird feeder. But if you've got plenty of acorns, they will probably prefer those. Just a brief look at feeders. This is what our feeder array looks like. We have, you notice we have we have domes over a lot of the feeders. It helps to keep the food dry, but it also helps to keep bird poop out of the feeders, which is important because the birds will sit up on top. That, more than anything, is problematic because there are certain diseases that are definitely spread from bird to bird by bird poop, and you don't want it getting into their food. I meant to bring one of these tube bird feeders with me. They only hold 4 birds at a time. They're called the Yankee Dippers. They have perches on that are made of stainless steel, and heavy birds will drop off, squirrels will drop off. They have a little spring, but the small birds can sit on them. They don't accumulate any gunk because they're made of steel. They don't accumulate bacteria. The birds have to take the seeds one at a time out of the hopper because there's only the four holes in the bottom, and they're very expensive, but they last forever. I've had some of mine for more than 20 years, so they're definitely worth the price. They stay clean. Now, if you have an outbreak of disease, one of the things they say was the birds can rub their eyes on the sides of the ports when they put their head in. If there's no need to take this type of bird feeder down and bleach the entire thing. All you need to do is keep the ports clean. So you can just and a way to do that is to get a cloth with some vinegar on it and just wipe around the sides of the ports periodically. And that it's an easy way to keep the working part of the feeder clean. I don't like. Oh, and there's something else going on here too. So let's just look at this next slide. We're getting to the end. Hold on. So what I'm doing is rewilding my yard, and we had this rabbit visiting this summer. It came in as a baby, and it got so tame I could get within 2 feet of it. But once it started eating my coneflowers and things, I thought, okay, that's too much. So I put up, you can see that fence and the thing on the left, that's a rabbit exclosure. And we have several raised beds where I'm raising pollinator plants. Particularly. And the one here that you see, this is the winter version. This is the Anise hyssop, or Agastache funiculum, which is a great pollinator plant. And it's also a great bird feeder plant. It produces nutlets that goldfinches just like. And there are other plants in this exclosure. Like I said, I have a whole presentation on that as well. But I just wanted to bring in, if you're worried about bird feeding, think about planting food for birds near your bird feeders so you can attract the birds with the bird feeders. But I see them all the time. The goldfinches, when I think they've eaten all the seeds out of this Agastache by now. But when it was in its prime and forming seeds, they would go to the hyssop first and then to the feeders. I was looking in there today, and I have 2 or 3 different types of sparrows that are in there looking for seeds in that exclosure. The thing where, in the picture with the rabbit is a native lonicera, a Lonicera sempervirens, a native honeysuckle, which feeds hummingbirds in the summertime. And they also go to those flowers first before they come to the feeder when they arrive in the yard. So they're preferentially going to that. And that vine also produces berries in the winter, which the birds will eat. So if you're worried about, I think anyway, if you want to have bird feeders, go ahead and put up bird feeders, but think about planting plants for the birds as well. And then that will take away, they can't make you come and rip all the plants out of your yard because it might attract bears, because you can attract bears with plants too. Try planting some strawberries, that'll do the trick, or things like that. So, but at least, and it's more natural, it's nature's way, and it's very satisfying. So this is an interesting picture. So this is some of the Agastache funiculum. This is a male goldfinch in summer. As I mentioned earlier, you can't see the wing bars in the summer because they're black. So it's eating, this is a plant that can produce flowers and seeds at the same time. So you can feed butterflies and birds at the same time. The butterflies and small bees mostly that go to this plant get the nectar, and the birds get the seeds. It's a fabulous plant. Everybody should have it. And another version of this photo went viral on Facebook. I think some master gardeners got hold of it. And you get, there's 500 likes and 600, and it just went crazy. I'd never seen anything like that before. And but people had a lot of interest in that. It's nice to see that people are interested in feeding birds and bees naturally. So here's the favorite seed feeder that I talked about. You can see how it's constructed. You can see on the top, on the right there is all the squirrel tooth marks as they tried to get into it but never succeeded. Oh, I should mention too, on those feeder arrays that I have baffles. You may have noticed on the pipes that were holding them up. Those baffles are they're called squirrel baffles, but they also baffle raccoons very effectively, I found. You can buy even larger ones if you want. They won't stop a bear, but they'll definitely keep the squirrels out of the feeders and the raccoons from taking the feeders away altogether, which they will occasionally do given the chance. And this is very durable. I'm not sure how much these cost now. I think it's over $100 each, but they are really fantastic feeders. They will last forever. Oops, oh dear, I did it again. This one, there we go. This is my least favorite type of feeder for the reason I mentioned earlier. The birds can walk in the food, it comes out of the hopper. Also, when we first moved here, we had a couple of these feeders up, and I was constantly going out and rescuing birds that somehow got into the hopper and couldn't get out again. I was mostly house finches. I don't know how they got in, because the space isn't very big, but get in they did. So I said we banned those from the end. Plus, there's a type of disease that's spreading in the West right now, which is some sort of enteric bacteria in birds. It's forming I don't know whether it's an E. coli or something like that infects birds through, their excrement. So you don't want that in the food that they're going to be eating. So that's why I don't like this type of feeder. If the birds can put their feet in it, it's not good. They have dirty little feet. Okay, to feed them, you can, I prefer sunflower chips. I've gone to this now because there's no waste, so you don't get piles and piles of debris on the ground. Another thing to do, by the way, for both bird health and bears is to keep the ground under the bird feeders clean. So just rake it, spread the seed wider. Bears won't, the birds will go around still and look for small seeds. The bears are not going to. They want big, like the mother bear there. Pour it into my mouth and just fill me up. They're not going to bother you or keep coming back to try if they have to forage that way. Make sure if you're feeding suet, which is very popular with woodpeckers, that it's not raw, so you don't go to the butcher and ask them for a big slab of fat. That's not good to feed the birds. It can get on their feathers and cause bacterial growth. If they feed it to their babies in the summer, the same thing happens. They get covered in the stuff. So the rendered fat, which comes in the solid blocks that don't melt, is what you want. You can also use peanut butter suet, but I can tell you that most of the wild birds don't like that as much, although it is nourishing. You get some small seed like millet for the sparrows and doves. We put very little of that out in the summer. The doves are going to have to go someplace else, like maybe to our native plants to find some seeds, because it also attracts cowbirds. So if you want to keep cowbirds to a minimum in your yard, don't feed the small seeds in the summer. Wait till they go. Only the sparrows need them in the winter, and the cowbirds are usually gone by then. Peanuts in the shell are good. We put them out every morning for our blue jays. They come, they take a few of their peanuts, and then they leave the whole array alone for the rest of the day. And titmice also like them. If you get pine siskins, this is the only time I buy Niger seed. If we have a pine siskin eruption, they will love that. Then you can put up those little net bags with the seeds in them, and they'll actually get eaten. Goldfinch seem to prefer sunflower seeds. And if you've got some extra spare change, you can buy some mealworms, like freeze-dried ones, or you can buy live ones. They're rather expensive, or you can grow your own. That's fun too, to have big boxes full of mealworms forming. Birds love those. Bluebirds will come and eat those in the winter. Carolina wrens love them. A lot of other birds, including sparrows, will eat mealworms. It's like everybody's favorite food, and they don't eat a lot of them because they're very rich in protein. And so they are kind of expensive to buy, but they last for a while. So something, especially if you see bluebirds in the winter, because bluebirds don't eat much. Sometimes they'll go to the suet feeder, but they will come for mealworms. And finally, don't forget the water. We're having some rain finally tonight, but this has been a godsend to birds, all sorts of things, and other animals that we're drinking. We had frogs in our bird baths, even when it was so dry this summer. And this is a heated bird bath. You just plug it in. It keeps the water at about 40 degrees. I got this heated bird bath when I saw chickadees eating snow in the wintertime. That's what they will do if there's no open water. So this can be a lifesaver too, because it helps the bird. If the birds eat snow, it really wreaks havoc on their body temperature. It will cause it to be lower. But if they have some fresh water, and mourning doves love it. They just stand in there on cold winter mornings. They're standing in there. It's like a spa with the steam rising up, and they're just standing there, enjoying the ambiance. My husband calls it the bird spa, for that reason. Okay, so finally, we come almost to the end here. This is just, I think I have some cards with these, and I can send these to Lori, and she can get them into the email that goes out to you afterwards because I don't think these two things are. But this is, if you want to know more about bird feeding and the pros and cons and some of the controversy, you can find out at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, which published a good story on that topic. And allaboutbirds.org, which is run by the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, is the Bible for birders, for bird feeders. You can find out everything that you need to know. There are lots of great information at the Cornell website. And that is the end. Thank you very much. So if you have any questions, we'll start here.
Okay, so if I got a bird bath, which I'm looking to get, do you have any tips on what to buy, and also how frequently do you need to clean it out?
You should probably clean it out every couple of days because the birds do poop in that too and walk around in it. But the one I have is really good. It comes on a hinge. It's designed to be placed on the deck. So it's on the deck. I just tip the hinge over, dump the water out, and pour some more in. It makes it very easy, and that one plugs into an outlet near the house. So that's the heated one. We don't obviously plug it in the summertime, just the winter. So that's easy. But there are a number of different kinds. Just see what would fit the space where you want to put it, and make it easy on yourself. So don't get a concrete one. Turn that one, empty it out. That would be hard. Oh, yes, that's right. Oh, yes, I can walk around. Oh, that's right. I forget there's an audience I can't see. Yes, Tony.
Speaking of water, we have a feeder for hummingbirds set up, but in the winter, of course, they're gone, and it just sits there. And so we left a little umbrella with water in it that keeps the ants out of the out of the.
Yeah, like an ant
hummingbird
moat.
feeder,
Uh-huh.
and the chickadees love it, and they're still loving it. Every morning I take a glass of water from the sink, pour it in
That's
that little
sweet.
thing, it rinses it out, and
Yeah.
the chickadees
That's a
and
great
some-
idea.
and some other birds,
Are using it, yeah.
smaller birds love it, and
That's
they take
fantastic.
baths in it, in a little tiny umbrella.
Oh, that's adorable.
It's really fun to watch.
That's fantastic. I have a very small bird bath that I hang up on the feeder array in place of some of the seed feeders. That's like very small like that for
Yeah,
small
we
birds,
have a-
which
we
they
have a
like. But
bigger
that's a great
black-
idea. You could put
We
those
have a
everywhere.
dog watering dish, it's sort of black rubber thing that we leave on the ground, and other birds like that, you know. And so water is very attractive, particularly this fall,
Particularly this
right?
fall.
And
It was
the-
critical, yeah.
We have a pond across the street, but they took all the shrubbery away from it. And so it's all open. It's probably a little dangerous for birds.
Yeah,
Nowadays because of that. So that's where they can go for water if they have to.
If-
But
yeah,
they
or if
prefer
there's
to
water in it.
play around with our water.
yeah, Bill, it's right, yeah, sure, absolutely. They probably feel safer. And birds, your bird bath should never be too deep because birds are afraid of drowning if they can't see the bottom. So you put some stones in and,
So that may keep them out of the pond too then.
yeah, as long as they have what they need. There's
They
no need to
prefer
go to
puddles,
a
but
more
they're
open
not getting
space.
puddles this
No,
fall.
Well, maybe after today we'll have a few. Yes, I think I'll just walk around with this microphone, so I'll go this way.
What are your thoughts on warming boxes?
On
Warming boxes?
warming boxes, I think you don't really need those in our climate. So if you're in the Arctic or something, that might be helpful. Although I see people are using them to keep frogs alive and keep them from getting a disease in the winter. They're putting warming boxes out on the ground for certain species of frogs. Not sure, I haven't investigated to see if it works for ours, but if birds need to, and chickadees will do this, if you have bird houses out, just clean out the old nests. And they will go in there in groups and keep warm by, you can have like 8 or 10 chickadees all together in a box on cold winter nights, keeping each other warm. So that type of shelter where they can gather in groups is helpful to them. So. Hi, anybody else here? Well, I've got the microphone over here. Oh, over here, okay. I'll be right down there in a minute. Yeah,
I wanted to make an observation about your comments about the proposed
Oh.
law, and that while I've had bears attack my bird feeder post, which I've like yours, and they just
and they
bent
just
it
bend
over.
them, yep.
So, but, that happened for 2 days, and then, they were searching for suitable habitat.
Right,
And my
exactly.
backyard is not exactly suitable habitat for bears or in
Yeah,
the
they
neighborhood.
usually don't hang around, they're
Right.
just,
The exception is in neighborhoods up north where people put out their trash cans.
exactly.
And a can of trash provides a lot more food for a
Absolutely.
bear than a bird feeder.
That's the major
And-
problem.
And that's, to me, the real problem, and, because to get a bear-proof trash can is a lot more expensive than to buy an ordinary trash can.
Yes,
And that then puts the onus on the
on
property
the
owner.
property owner, exactly. Yeah, I think, I'm just hoping this law will not go through because I think it's ridiculous. But we maybe want to say something like this and send some objections in before it gets passed into law, before we don't need any more laws that can't be enforced and that don't make sense.
I'll just add that while bears have been found in every county in New Jersey, they are most common north of Interstate 80.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we find them here periodically, but
Yeah.
they're usually moving through, and there aren't all that many compared to further north.
Absolutely.
You got to consider the habitat in New Jersey.
And-
It's not the same all over.
And you shouldn't be afraid of them. Every bear, I have, those pictures that I just showed you, the first, I saw the bear when I was on the deck. And I saw it making this, when it makes this face, and they often do that when you meet them. I've actually encountered them on trails. I've encountered bears a few times, like face to face. And they make this face, they have terrible eyesight, but they have good hearing and excellent sense of smell, and as soon as they catch your scent, that's what they're looking for. What is this? Oh my God, it's a human! And they turn and they run in the opposite direction. We had one, my husband came around the house one night and saw a bear in the backyard near the bird feeder, and they both looked at each other like this, and they both turned around, but the bear turned and ran for the nearest shrub. It was like an azalea about this big. Tried to get in there, but couldn't, kept on, went right through and headed for the woods. So I went to get the little video I showed you. I went upstairs to a bedroom window where the bear couldn't smell me and took the pictures from there. Not because I was afraid of the bear, but because I knew the bears were going to run away, if I got any closer to them. So, be sensible, but don't be afraid, I tell people, it's, they don't want to hang out with you. They really don't. Maybe I'll make my way down to, oh, thanks, Ray. I'll go in this way, I think. There. Hi, I think you had a question?
Yes. My question was basically, and I realized it's sort of complex, but different birds have different amount of awareness levels and people. And I was wondering, like birds like chickadees, titmice that are very comfortable, do they recognize actual individuals, or do they just recognize a body there? And because you can keep getting closer to them, if you keep feeding them habitually.
That's
So
right, yeah.
do
They
actually
come to see
recognize-
who's not a danger. That's a
Is
good
it
question.
actually an actual person, or just, could any figure be there, or does that have to be a certain person?
Well, when it comes to chickadees and titmice, I'm not sure, but they have done experiments with crows, for example, and ravens, and they definitely do recognize individual people. And they recognize individuals who have done them wrong, like,
For 18
and
years,
remember,
right?
for years.
18 years, I read.
So I think there might be an element of that to it, because, they certainly will be more comfortable if you're bringing food and not doing them any harm. But most of the time, they still like to keep their distance. I know people who have tamed cardinals and things like that. I think that you might be able to do that. It would take a long time. And then there are other birds that seriously don't want to, they don't want you anywhere near them.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks. That's a good question. Going to get me doing some thinking about that now. Anybody else back here? Okay, let me get over there.
I'm just curious about your backyard where you had a selection of bird feeders,
Yeah.
high and low. How do you keep the squirrels away from them?
Well, I have those baffles on the pole, so they're hung up about 10 feet above the ground, or at least that's where the suspension point is. And those baffles, they're not near anything, they're not near trees, so the squirrels can't jump to them. They can't jump up to them, it's just a little bit too high. And the baffles, they can't climb the pole because they can't get past the pole. They'd have to bend over backwards like
Well,
this.
we got squirrels that can climb a pole.
Climb a pole, yeah, but can they climb a pole with the baffle on it? Because this, so
Well, the
this
baffle's
baffle
on
is,
top.
the baffle is in, it's in the middle of the pole. Yeah, it's right in the middle of the pole.
it's in the
like,
middle of the pole.
and it's like if you hung a can over the pole. So the squirrel gets up into there, and then the top is closed, so it can't go any further. And they can't get on the outside of the baffle because it moves this way, and it also, if they get on top of the baffle, it moves up and down. So it's really quite cleverly designed.
Right, and what about the relationship between the birds and the squirrels? Some birds smell like a squirrel and they stay away from the,
I think they've reached non-entente cordiale, actually. The birds and the squirrels, as long as everybody has enough to eat, they're okay. Yeah, they don't seem to be really a deterrent. Okay, Lori, I think I saw you with your hand up.
Yeah, I have a question. My Winterberry holly is bare already this year.
So is mine.
Normally, it has beautiful bright red berries. Quick plug for Winterberry hollies. Gorgeous plant to feed the
Usually get them
birds.
at least up until about Christmas.
Yes, and it normally has really lovely berries on it all the way through the holidays, and then they
And then
descend
it's
upon it
ready
and
for them
strip
to
it,
eat.
but now it's empty already. Is that related to the drought, do you
It
think?
is, I think. And I was talking to our nursery manager at Bowman's Hill the other day, and he was saying he's seeing a lot of unripe berries on plants in the garden center there being eaten by birds. And he thinks it's because of the drought. So a lot of the berries on other plants aren't ripening properly. They need a certain amount of water to plump out. So some of these ones that are usually have to go, some of them even have to go through a frost cycle to become really edible. Are the only thing that's left right now, and they're being eaten. So I think there's a definite cause-effect relationship there. And it's not just the winter berries, it's also things like the Lonicera berries were being eaten. before they were ripe. I've noticed a lot of berries missing on things like pokeweed already. A lot of things are already stripped bare, so we'll see what happens later on in the winter.
So should I plan on putting out suet that has berries in it or something for those berry eaters?
They're
that-
usually just happy with the suet. The berries, when they really start needing berries, is around February, so you might consider it then, because that's when it's going to be even worse this year, because a lot of those berries are going to be gone well before that already. But there are certain suite of berries that become edible in that month, and then you'll start seeing robins. A good is to remember, if any of you have crab apples, that's a great February winter food for. I see, one time, I just happened to glance out the window and saw a robin, a pileated woodpecker, and a flicker all eating these crab apples in February. And I didn't even know pileateds would eat fruit in the winter, but apparently they do, because there it was. So that's a good plant, and a lot of, I think, Kirsty, you said once you had a lot of crab apples in your yard, so that's a benefit. They're gonna feed birds in the winter, but I know you probably have too many. They do spread, but they're beautiful in the spring too. So, yeah.
So speaking of growing natural bird feeders, would you come back another time and have a talk on
Well,
that topic?
since you asked so nicely, and since I'm a huge supporter of the Sourland Conservancy, of course I would.
That would be
I'd
lovely.
be glad to.
That would be lovely.
And I'll tweak it specifically. I'm working on that new program now, because my whole yard is a giant laboratory. It's really, truly being rewilded. My husband is out there all the time now that he's retired, taking out invasive plants. It's become an obsession, but it's wonderful. What's coming up naturally, just within the seed bed, just having these invasives removed is unbelievable. Everybody needs to do this. And get to know the plants that are replacing them. It's fantastic. So I've got a lot more suggestions now to make that I could incorporate into an updated program, and I'd be delighted.
That would be lovely. In the meantime, please do, if you're on social media, check out our Sourland Stewards Facebook group. Look at on our website, there's a link to our blog. There are lots of interesting articles there on things that you can do to attract wildlife to your yard. Removing invasives, rolling back your lawn, as we like to say, or expanding your native gardens, and you'll attract all kinds of wonderful wildlife, including butterflies, whose caterpillars will feed the birds
That's right.
at other times of
It's
year.
all a big web, and you need all the parts of it, and then it all works beautifully, and you don't have to do anything except sit back and enjoy it when you get to that point.
So please do check your email for the follow-up to this event, and also check out our website for more information. If you ever have any questions, don't hesitate to email info@sourland.org, and we will connect you with the expert if we can't answer those questions for you. So in closing, I would just like to say thank you again to everyone who came out on this rainy night to hear our talk. Thanks again to the Watershed Institute. Really, really appreciate using this space and your wonderful hospitality. Really, really generous. Thank you so much. And I hope to talk to you all soon. Please do stop by our table on the way out. Take your native seeds, start your own wild bird feeder on your way. You can just sprinkle them and grow some nice native plants that will feed wildlife all year long. And take some literature with you, and have a great night, and I hope to see you all again soon. Thank you so much.